Hello, and you're very welcome to National Arthritis Week and to our discussion around mindfulness and arthritis. My name is Brian Lynch. I look after communications for Arthritis Ireland. I'm delighted to be joined today by Susan Barrett, who is a mindfulness teacher from Kerry and who has done fantastic work with our Kerry branch. Susan, thank you so much for talking to us today and for introducing mindfulness to people with arthritis and for organising a number of taster sessions for us. So thank you so much. Um, Mindfulness is one of those very in vogue terms right now, isn't it? You know, it's real zeitgeisty type of thing.
Mhm.
And particularly, I suppose, during COVID and pandemic, we've become much more mindful and much more aware of our own bodies and our own selves. But for someone who might have heard the term, but perhaps be unfamiliar with it, how would you describe mindfulness?
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, for inviting me to join you, and welcome to everybody watching. I suppose the first thing to say about mindfulness is that yes, it is a term that is in vogue in recent years and recent decades, but in actual fact, it's a very old practice that dates more than 2,500 years old. So the very same practices that we engage in now, because mindfulness is a type of meditation, are the same practices that people for centuries have participated in around the world. So that's interesting to know that it's not actually something new. It's not one of these new fads, a new age kind of a thing that might just, disappear next year. The reason we're hearing more about it in the last 40 years is because of a man called Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who is an American molecular biologist. And John had a personal practice of mindfulness meditation, and he began to introduce it to people in the University Hospital in Massachusetts, to people who were experiencing chronic pain. So actually, this contemporary mindfulness that we're all working with now began, and that might be of interest particularly to
Mhm.
your members, began as a support to people who were living with conditions of chronic pain that they were experiencing every day. How you would describe mindfulness? It is really about the cultivation of awareness. It's about really bringing our attention into this present moment. And, we hear that term so commonly, the present moment. And actually, most of us recognize in our own minds that we have a tendency to jump ahead, to think about what's coming down the line. And likewise, we have a tendency to go back and to constantly rehash old memories, old conversations, whatever. And in this process of going from one to the other in our mind, we can very often find that we're losing our ability to be present to the life that we're actually living in this moment.
Mm.
So much of mindfulness is exactly that, learning to live the life, to really live our life, because we are living it, but in actual fact, our mind might be somewhere else.
Mm.
So we're really learning to live the life that we're living right now.
That's really interesting, and particularly the piece around chronic pain. And I think the fact that there is, if you like, an evidence base underpinning the practice of mindfulness and what it delivers for people is hugely comforting to know as well. That there's a kind of a strong scientific basis to it. So that's good to know. In terms of your own experience, for people who live with chronic conditions like arthritis, many will have arthritis and perhaps comorbid conditions as well, or who are living with chronic pain. What have you seen that they have gained from that over time?
Well, I've worked with many people now over the last decade or so who have come to mindfulness courses with me with a whole range of pain conditions. And I think, it's interesting to say we're talking specifically maybe here today about some elements of physical pain. But in my experience, suffering is so much more than that. Suffering can also include people who are really struggling with mental and emotional pain. And oftentimes there's a very strong link between the two. If we're living with conditions of chronic pain, that can really run us down. We can just feel so weary and exhausted, and everyday life can become an effort. So, one of the things I suppose I'd like to say about any condition that we're living with is that we are confronted with the fact that we're in a human body, and to be living in this human body means that we will suffer in some way. As
Mhm.
we age, the body breaks down, we get older. Um, but physical suffering obviously affects some people more than others. So the types of things that people experience that I have met who have chronic pain is that it's very seldom only the physical pain that is causing the difficulty. It's also somebody's reaction to the pain. There are very few people who say, oh, yeah, bring it on. I'm in pain. This is great. I have a day filled with pain. Very, very seldom do we have that positive response to experiencing pain. Mostly there's a sense of this. We're pushing it away. We don't like it. We want to get rid of it. We resist it. And with the physical pain can come a lot of mental anguish, as I'm sure, Brian, your members are well familiar with. And there's the term that psychologists use quite commonly now, a term called catastrophizing, whereby we tend to think the worst case scenario.
Mm.
So, you know, I've had people describe to me, and I've experienced it myself when I've woken up a day I mightn't have felt well, or I'm feeling some pain in the body, and how quickly our mind kicks in and says, oh, here we go again. This is how I was last week. I'm going to be like this again. I'm not going to be able for what I'm doing today. And the cycle of negative thinking and worst case scenario thinking can take off really very quickly. And before we know it, there's those thoughts can bring very strong emotions in the body. We can really very quickly experience pain. We can experience fear and a lot of anxiety. And when we meet fear and anxiety, it can show up physically in the body. So the thoughts and emotions we're experiencing can actually create more physical sensations. So this cycle of catastrophizing, cycle of pain, can continue, and it's very challenging to work with.
Mm. You're right. And I mean, I suspect that that will certainly be familiar to many people, you know, the kind of how arthritis disrupts lives, you know, it tears up our plans. People can be hit with flares from nowhere. Medication that was working suddenly stops working. You know, and certainly there, I suppose that is the daily lived reality of the condition, isn't it? And it's interesting hearing you talking about those emotions, and I suppose guilt and shame and a sense of stigma and letting people down. That's also part of that emotional baggage, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think probably one of the things that we see most when people experience suffering of any kind is that there's a strong wish for things to be different. We really want things to be other than they actually are. So that in itself can generate, in a sense, it's like another layer of suffering. We already have this primary pain, this primary condition that we're trying to live with and live as well as we can with. But on top of that, the fear, the anxiety, the shame, the guilt that we can experience is like another layer of pain on top of that.
Mm.
I'd love to say that mindfulness offers a magic bullet for dealing with all of this, a magic wand that you could wave all these symptoms away. And of course, unfortunately, that isn't the case. But what it can do is it can really offer us the opportunity to become more aware of the cycle that we're generating. We pay a lot of attention in mindfulness practice to the physical body. So if you're coming on a course with me, for example, we would spend a lot of time bringing attention to our breathing, the sense of the body sitting on the chair, the feet on the floor, and beginning to notice some of the thoughts that arise for us when our mind is pulled away. How do we bring it back to the moment? So it sounds like, well, I don't want to, my body's already in pain. I'm already suffering. The last thing I want to do is to lean into that suffering even more. It sounds counterintuitive. How could this possibly help me? But in actual fact, what much of the research has shown, and I've seen it with many people I've worked with and experienced it in my own life, that if we can actually get to know our suffering even a little bit better, if we can get to know some of the things that may trigger us, some of the pain conditions that suddenly kick us into a cycle of negative thinking, if we can develop more awareness about that, then it offers us the opportunity to really work with that secondary layer of suffering, to bring our attention right back into the, and oftentimes it's not the physical pain that people find the most difficult. It's actually all the other emotional and mental pain that comes with it that can really bring about that sense of overwhelm.
Mm. Someone watching this might kind of be able to identify with all of that, and hopefully they will, but they may kind of think, okay, that sounds fantastic, but how do I approach this? How do I introduce myself to mindfulness? And I'm uncertain in terms of how to work with it. How would you guide someone in who wants to start or learn more about mindfulness?
Yeah, I'll be very happy to say a little more about that. But what I might suggest is, why don't we do a little short mindfulness practice now?
Sure,
Just
sure.
we can use you as the guinea pig, Brian.
Yes, well, given the day I've had so far, I could definitely benefit from it. Yeah.
You know, mindfulness, we don't have to be unwell to benefit from mindfulness. The general busyness and the juggling that so many of us are doing in life, we can also benefit from just pausing, slowing things down a little. So why don't we just settle in for a moment, for a minute or two? And if anybody viewing this and any of your members who might be tuning in are welcome to do the same. We're inviting a sense of wakefulness into this moment, a sense of being alert and really present. If you find it more helpful to close the eyes or even lower them to a point in front of you, you're welcome to try that. And let's take a moment just to settle into simply sitting here. And I'd like to invite you to turn your attention towards your physical body for a moment. Just noticing how it feels right now. There may be pain and discomfort present, a feeling of tiredness perhaps, some restlessness or fidgety feeling. So we're not trying to change anything in our mindfulness experience. We're simply opening to things just as they are right now. And directing your attention now down to the area of your feet. It's like you're taking a beam of light and directing it there. Really noticing the contact of your feet with the floor beneath you. Sense of your feet really grounding you. Moving your attention now up to the base of your body, resting on the chair beneath you. And sensing how this part of your body really anchors you here, grounds you, offering you some support in this moment. Broadening your attention now over the whole body sitting here. The spine rising upright. Your arms sloping down the sides of your body. And your hands resting in front of you. And inviting a deep, full breath into the body now. Really releasing that breath. And perhaps taking another couple of full, deep breaths, allowing the body to expand like a balloon as you breathe in. And on the out breath, inviting a sense of softening into your shoulders, into the area of your face. Gently allowing your breath now to return to its regular rhythm. And whenever you feel ready, raising or opening the eyes. How did you get on with that, Brian?
It's very, very helpful, actually, very beneficial.
Is there anything in particular you noticed?
It's slowing down, actually, I think, isn't it? It's the kind of all of the frenzy of so many things you've got to do during the day, or all the things that are encroaching in your life. They just kind of dissipate.
Yeah, they can do. And for others, it can be that that to-do list keeps whirring away in the mind and they actually feel, oh, I've so much to do. How could I possibly take this time out? So yes, you're right. There is something about mindfulness practice that supports us to really slow down. It's like pressing the pause button in our life. And in this slowing down, we learn to even physiologically calm the whole stress reactivity in the body down, to calm things down, to really lower things. So, as well as mindfulness supporting the management of pain, it also has great benefits for sleep, for high blood pressure, for a whole range of other health conditions.
And of course, that fact of it being a practice, something that people have to do. You can't possibly not really just dip your toe in and out, because chances are the first several times people look. I know personally, kind of thought, oh, what was all that about? And I can't do that, and my brain is still firing away at a mile a minute.
Well, I think unfortunately there is a common misconception about mindfulness that we're all sitting with our legs crossed, in the middle of a lake and that looking absolutely blissful, that it's about achieving an empty mind, a state of bliss. In actual fact, I'm much more interested in the pragmatic application of mindfulness to our everyday lives. How does it actually support me to manage the day that I don't feel well, that I haven't slept well, that I feel irritable? How does it support me to manage the discomfort I feel when someone in the supermarket checkout in front of me is taking too long and I feel irritated? So, the practical application of mindfulness to our lives is really something I've seen that people benefit hugely from. And also, I would think the element of self-care that's implicit in mindfulness. There's a sense where we're learning to be kinder to ourselves. Most of us, myself included, have the kind of mind that tends to be very critical, and we tend to think very harshly of ourselves. We give out about ourselves. I should have done this. I could have done this. And when we come to mindfulness practice and we start to notice those thoughts. Really, the practice is about noticing some of the patterns that we have developed over years and thinking, I actually don't have to think that any longer. I don't have to talk to myself like that any longer. And when that happens, there's a kind of a softening that can happen. We can become a little bit more compassionate towards ourselves, a little bit kinder towards ourselves. But you asked me earlier, Brian, about how people might engage with mindfulness and what they might do. There are tons of resources out there, lots of clips on YouTube. Anything by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn is always worth looking at. Lots of books on mindfulness. But really, those resources are supportive when you've actually had the chance to learn it from a mindfulness teacher, because it's a difficult practice to learn from a book or from a YouTube tutorial. You really need to engage in a mindfulness course, learn how to do the practices. Like the course that I have an introductory course running online at the moment. And for home practice this week, as well as listening to a 20-minute guided CD every day or an audio recording, people are actually bringing attention to washing their hands, the little everyday activity that we always do, slowing it down. They're also bringing attention to having a cup of tea or coffee without any phones on, without any radio on, bringing their attention right there to the activity that they're doing.
mm,
So signing up for a course, I'm very happy to, my website is susanbarrettmindfulness.com. So I have courses running from time to time. We have a Mindfulness Teachers Association of Ireland, mtai.ie. So they're a group of certified, qualified mindfulness teachers throughout the country. When we're back in action and we can offer our courses in person, um, people can find some more information there too on
that,
courses
that,
in your area.
that's fantastic. And we'll share that information with people. It's interesting hearing you talking about the expectations that people might have, in terms of their lives or their careers or their families, and knowing what arthritis does to those dreams, and that should have, would have, could have type of narrative that can feed in, and how destructive that can be for people, and the distress that it causes so many as well. So to have something like mindfulness to be able to respond to that and balance it a bit must be hugely beneficial.
Well, I think of what is happening when you have any limitation to your health or when you have any change in circumstances, it is a loss of some kind. So, some of the cycles that people can experience are similar to a bereavement because the body that you might have been used to living in, the life you might have been living, is no longer possible to you. So, mindfulness can really support with coming to terms with that loss. I wish there were a magic bullet that could make it easy. Sometimes I'm often reminded of that serenity prayer. Grant me the how does it start? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So mindfulness practice can help us to see where we're investing wasted energy. And some of the wasted energy that we invest is in wishing that I was in a different kind of a body, that my body was not bothering me in the way it is, wishing that things in my life were different. When we come to see how much energy we're investing in wishing that things were otherwise, we can come to a greater acceptance of, well, this is the body I'm living in right now. This
Mm.
is the life that I'm living right now. How can I actually make the most of this life that I'm actually in and not the one that I wish I were in?
And of course, that acceptance, that's the key word there, isn't it? In terms of, and back to the serenity prayer, really, kind of, this is my reality. It may not have been what I would have thought it was going to be, but actually, this is reality.
It is, and it's not. I mean, I would hate anyone to think that I'm suggesting that that's an easy process for anybody to engage in. I've experienced loss in my own life and changes to circumstances, and I know that there's a process that we have to go through that is inevitable. But some of us go through that more easily than others. And certainly, I have seen with many people that I've worked with that mindfulness can be one part of that toolkit of support. There
Mm-hmm.
are lots of other supports. We need medical intervention with our conditions of arthritis. We need the support of, nurses and other medical professions, other people who are living with similar conditions. We need physical exercise, physios, OTs, but mindfulness is a very significant component in that kind of holistic approach to managing any health condition that we can live with. And it's not just me saying that, it really is backed up by a lot of scientific research over the last 40 years that shows that when people engage with mindfulness practice, and it doesn't mean that you have to go and live on a hillside in Tibet for 3 years in splendid isolation and meditate. These are people who are living everyday lives, rearing families, trying to work, but they're building more awareness into their day. They're pausing more. They're giving themselves a little bit more self care. They're learning more about the patterns of reactivity and the patterns of thinking that tie them up in knots.
Mm-hmm.
And when those supports are in place for people, I think it is more possible to live as full a life as we can, regardless. There's an underlying principle in mindfulness that I love that John Kabat-Zinn often speaks about, that there's more right with you than wrong with you. When we have any kind of health condition, we tend to focus on all the things that are wrong with us, the parts of us that don't work well, the bits that cause us pain. And we tend to overlook the parts of our body that are actually still serving us quite well.
Mm.
So even, people can come to that understanding that no matter how broken we feel, emotionally, mentally, physically, we can still be whole. We can still be a whole person. And that's how I like to meet people when they come to, when people come to a mindfulness course with me, they're coming with all sorts of different challenges and struggles. Some of them are mental, some of them are physical,
Mm.
but we need to meet each other as people,
Mm.
not just as a condition.
Sure.
We're each of us so much more than whatever particular condition we're living with.
Susan, on that, just in terms of the physical pain, I suppose, because I'm conscious that part of mindfulness can be around body scans and people are being seated and, the feet on the ground. But for someone who is, I suppose, maybe, arthritis causes so much physical pain, how people deal with that discomfort and manage to kind of both maintain a mindful pose and yet are aware that they've got this chronic pain that's in their knee or their hip or their shoulder. And just a couple of quick words around that in terms of how they might, at a practical level, if you like, address it.
On a practical level, when someone has pain and they're coming to a mindfulness practice, it is really important to establish a posture that supports them as much as possible. So, say next week in the 3 practices I'll be offering, and we'll be recording, we'll be doing a lying down body scan, we'll be doing a bit of gentle mindful movement, and we'll do a sitting guided meditation practice. But I will be leaving it completely invitational for people to take up a posture that supports them best. So we can be mindful in any posture whatsoever. And I think it's so important to first and foremost take care of our body's needs in whatever way that is. So if we're doing a movement practice and someone finds it very easy to lift their arm and someone else can only move their arm that far, it's the quality of awareness that we are bringing to what we're doing is far more important than the range of movement, for example.
Mm.
So, setting supports up for yourself, having cushions, extra supports, pain medication if needed, and really bringing in that self-care for the body before engaging in any mindfulness practice can be really helpful, Brian. Um, there's no shoulds about mindfulness practice. You don't have to sit cross-legged in a chair. You don't have to lie down for a body scan. Everything can be adapted. And I think the bottom line is people really need to say, there's a good question I often work with in my own life and my own practice is, what's called for right now? What's called for in this moment? Is it better for me physically to, we can be really hard on ourselves. We think, oh, everybody else is sitting up meditating, that means I have to do that. But actually what might be called for your body is to allow yourself the permission to lie down and to give yourself some extra support.
That's great to hear. I think a lot of people will be comforted by that and probably encouraged as well to try this out. And that really is, I suppose, our focus this week on mental health is something we've been thinking about for a while. We all know the physical symptoms of arthritis, the pain, the destruction, the fatigue, but it's the mental health aspects, that tend to get forgotten about. And I suppose, particularly during COVID, we're particularly aware of the challenges that people are experiencing. So throughout this week, we're running a kind of a variety of information events and posting information on our social media channels and our website. And so we're really delighted to have just these little bite-sized pieces of introduction to mindfulness, hopefully to whet people's appetite, to introduce them to the practices. And Susan, we're really delighted that you were able to spend this time with us today, just kind of setting the scene as much as anything else. And we look forward then to broadcasting those 3 sessions over the coming days. They'll be airing at 11 a.m. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But even beyond that, if people can't tune in live, they're going to be on our Facebook, YouTube, and website and other channels as well. So, Susan, thank you so much. Thank you all for watching. And please know that we're always here for you. And we have our helpline, of course. If anyone ever needs to call that, it's 0818 252 846. And our website address is arthritisireland.ie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian, for inviting me to join you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to some of your members tuning in next week for some mindfulness practice with me.
Great. Thanks, Susan.